Okay, hi. Um, First, let me introduce myself. I'm Arlinda Boyer. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto here in the English department. And when I took the graduate level version of this course a few years ago, I made what could be a kind of important discovery about the York cycle. So I'm here to introduce you to that, sort of walk you through that discovery, and to introduce the readings that you'll be doing from the York cycle. I'm a huge doofus seeing myself on camera, so I'll do a ton of screen sharing. Uh, First thing I want to show you is actually the York pageant route. Let me try and share that screen. There we go. Okay, this is the 12-station York pageant map. It's the stations could range between 10 and 17, but 12 was the most common number. It's kind of the rule of thumb that 12 is what they used. It starts here at Trinity Priory, proceeds to Micklegate 1, Micklegate 2, and this is a kind of a downhill over the bridge, over the river, over a bridge, over the river. And then it kind of goes like a backward question mark up these streets here, which is York Minster. And then it goes through. These are the medieval streets of York. It's actually only about a 15-minute walk to walk this path. It's a few city blocks. And it ends here at Pavement. And we're going, that's the route. It's, and here are, yeah, I'm sorry, being kind of jumping around a little bit, but this is the route that all the pageants took. And here are all the pageants. I'm going to share a different screen. This one. Here are all the York pageants that you're going to be reading. And this is where you're reading them from, I believe, this website, the York Corpus Christi Plays, on the online version of it. And there are 47 plays, as you can see. There are a couple, these 22A, 23A, these are texts that don't have any text. These are pageants whose text has been lost. So they're noted because we know they existed and we know their names, and sometimes we have maybe 2 or 8 lines of them, sometimes 0 lines. But these are the 47 plays. And if you add the 3 that actually are 22A, 23A, and there's another way down here, 44A, if you add those in, it's 50 plays even. It's easy to, when you see them like this, you sort of, like every book, like every codex, you open it at the beginning and read through to the end. You read the plays through traditionally, sort of beginning to end. And because this is how they've been read, it's really easy to believe that this is also how they were performed. Each pageant moving along. I don't know if I can jump back and forth from, not easily, from share to share, but each pageant moving along the route one by one by one, stopping at every station and playing. And that's kind of what was understood as the performance strategy. All 50 plays, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all through 12 stations. It's even easier to believe that this is how it was performed because that's how the city of Chester performs their cycle. But Chester takes 3 full days for their festival. They can do a third of the plays each day and wrap it up in a kind of reasonable day. The problem is, it's too easy to believe that these two things are, that the map and I should have made them a split screen, that the map and the row of plays here are commensurate with each other, because they're not. It's too easy to believe this because it's not physically possible to perform 50 plays at 12 stations in just a 24-hour span. And the records that we have from York do specify very clearly that it only took 1 day. The entire festival was a single day long. There's just no way to do that. And it was very confusing for scholars for a very long time. Scholars variously attempted to recreate this. what's this kind of called a maximal procession, which is a maximal production, which is every pageant in order at every station. That's the maximum version of things. Every attempt to recreate it has only ever tried at most 4 or 5 stations. No one's ever actually tried all 12 stations. And they've, even at just 4 stations, they've struggled to get it finished in less than 18 hours. It just doesn't seem to be possible to add 6 or 7 more stations and perform all the pageants at each of them in just 24 hours. If it takes 18 hours to do just 1/3 of the number of stations, there's no real way you can do all of them in 24. By the way, the most ambitious attempt at recreating this was most of the recreations didn't even do all the plays, all 47. The most ambitious attempt was at the University of Toronto in 1998 in the area right around Victoria College. And it did all 47 plays, but at only 4 stations. And the day began at, I believe, 6 a.m. and ended after midnight. So it's about almost a 20 hours, about a 20-hour day. Ran a little bit long for various reasons of sharing pageant wagons and such, but on the whole, it was, I think if you took all that back, it would have ended around 9:30. It's still a really long day. It's still like 15 hours, and that's only with 4 stations. So attempts to solve this conundrum were one reason for the formation of READ, the Records of Early English Drama. Scholars knew that they had 2 facts in front of them that seemed mutually exclusive. The way Margaret Rogerson put it, one of the historians of the place, is, quote, "The challenge for the theater historian is to reconcile the compelling evidence of the documentation from medieval York that it could be done with the equally compelling physical evidence of modern production practice that it could not be done." Everyone agreed that all the relevant records needed to be gathered, edited, and published so that researchers could have access to them from all over the world, and maybe someone would, among other things, find a solution for this. And that was one of the impetuses behind READ being formed. I didn't know any of this when I took the graduate level course. But when I learned about it, I thought, that's really interesting. So it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle with roughly 12 fixed pieces, the stations, and roughly 47 to 50 moving pieces, the pageants. If it's a puzzle with a finite number of pieces, then there has to be a solution. So what I came up with was a scheme of staggering the start. Every individual pageant performs, let me go back to the map, and there we go. Every individual pageant performs at every 4th station, but rather than all the plays starting at Trinity Prior, which is kind of as station 1, you might think, well, they all have to start there. They don't. Some of the wagons begin their cycle at the 2nd, 3rd, or even the 4th station, Micklegate 1, Micklegate 2, and Ousegate, and they move to every 4th station from that starting point. The innovation of this proposal is the pattern of station skipping. It's the first 4 pageants taking the first 4 stations, but in reverse order. That is, plays 1 through 4 take stations 4 through 1 respectively, and that's really hard to visualize. So let me show you this only slightly Monty Python-esque demonstration. It lasts about 4 minutes, and I think I'll play it twice while I talk over it. There's no sound to it. First, kind of watch the bird's eye view of the pageants working their way along that backward question mark route. And then, kind of the second time, when you've got that part pretty well sussed out, the second time, choose a station or 2 and watch which plays will show up if you happen to be a spectator at that station. So here's the, let me stop that share and do a different share. Here is, maybe. No, here we go. Sorry. Okay, this is the screen I want to share. And play. Make that full screen. Okay, so at 8 a.m., the first wagon, I just kind of assumed an 8 a.m. start for no particular reason, except it's reasonable to expect people to get up at that hour. Some people, not me necessarily. At 8 a.m., the first wagon steps off from Trinity Priory, and it's followed by the rest in 10-minute increments. The first wagon, which is this one, Creation of the Angels and the Fall of Lucifer, doesn't stop until it reaches the fourth station and then starts to play at 8:15. The second wagon, Creation of the Creation through the Fifth Day, starts out 10 minutes later, goes to the third station and starts to play. Third wagon, Creation of Adam and Eve, goes to Micklegate 1, where it starts to play at 8:25. And finally at 8:30, the fourth wagon pulls in the Prohibition of the Tree of Knowledge, pulls into Trinity and starts to play immediately. All four plays are performed more or less simultaneously, each at its respective station. Each wagon then passes through the next three stations and then stops at the fourth. So if you started at 4, you stop again at 8, and then you stop again at 12, which is what is going on right now. The first wagon, and then it vanishes because it's done with its playing day. While the first 4 wagons have gone around and reached the end of the route, the second 4 have launched, and they're now filling stations 4 through 8 and beginning to make this first one is beginning to make its way toward 12. And the 4 following, the pageants 9, 10, 11, and 12, have begun their progress through. There's 11, 12 hasn't quite stepped onto the playing field yet, and they're occupying the first 4 stations, and so on to the end of the day. So there we go. There's number 12 popping into place. And here are the second 4 doing their stopping and playing. And when they get to 12, like I said, they just kind of vanish because that's the end of their playing day. They exit and they go break down the wagon and everybody has a beer. So what this does is it allows all 12 stations to see 12 or 13 plays apiece, which, as it turns out, provides a clear, coherent narrative a narrative arc featuring every important element of the cycle in terms of creation, nativity, miracles, the crucifixion, and the final judgment. So to kind of talk it over again, and this is almost done. Let's assume that York organizers aim to achieve at least 4 goals as we think about this. First, to stage all the pageants. The ideal York cycle was always imagined to include all the pageant wagons, and logistical difficulty was the only reason that was ever given for not including all of them. The plan offered here includes every play multiple times at multiple stations, and it does it in a single day. It's beginning to wrap up now. I said I started at 8 o'clock. By about 11:40, 11:45, I think, by the time it's done, because we're wrapping up here, the first 12 plays are finished. They're finished by noon. So let me stop. Actually, let me replay it. You can get through a quarter of the plays in just 3 hours. That's not possible if you're doing them all at every single station. Not by a long shot, actually. But let's assume that the York organizers had 4 goals. One was to stage all the pageants. 2 is to utilize all the stations, because what makes a station if not the promise of performance? Without a performance, then a station is not different from any other part of the street, like mid-block or something, right? People bid for the right to have a station, and they built seating, and they sold refreshments. They sold, what's the word? Refreshments. I can't think of the word I wanted, like move concessions. That's the word I wanted. They sold food and drink. They had maybe music players wandering around, but they definitely had seating, food, and drink at least. So why would you bid for that if the pageant wagon is just drifting past you, right? Because you could just be any other house on the block and you'd have that same view. So what makes a station if not performance? So I think we want to assume that all of the stations were used for performance. And that's what this does. A lot of others, that's the problem with cutting it down to 4 or 5 stations. Scholars said, well, maybe they just passed through all the others like a parade float and just stopped at the really important places in town, like York Minster, or like station number 8, which is Common Hall. The same thing is basically City Hall, where the mayors and all the dignitaries were watching. But that kind of really cheapens, say, station 7. You know, what does that poor guy do who spent all the money to bid for that station? So yeah, I think my goal was to use every station. Third goal is to present a coherent biblical narrative. The cycle's purpose is education, spiritual edification, and it doesn't make any sense if you mix up all the pieces of the story and start with, so this guy is killed, and then wait, he was born, and then wait, but 1,000 years before that, the world was created. You know, you have to keep them in order, and you have to tell a coherent story. And finally, to wrap up in one day, because that is what the evidence from the record says. My total schedule does this, and it performs every play, it involves every station, and it lasts from, ultimately, you can't see it in this little clip, but it lasts from 8 a.m. to 10:15, roughly, from the first pageant's entrance at Trinity Priory here to the very last pageant's exit from the pavement. That's a bird's eye view of the route. From a station's view, as I asked you to kind of look at it the second time, it looks like this. Every 4th pageant stops at your station, performs for its length, full length, which is 5 to 25 minutes. The plays are pretty widely variant in length, and moves away. Before the next pageant that you'll see begins, there's a break of variable length, but during that time, the other 3 that you're not seeing will pass through like parade floats. So passing but not stopping, not playing for you. So if you're an audience member who takes up a seat at, say, Common Hall, Station 8, your experience of the day's cycle is that something is happening in front of you every few minutes, and very roughly every 20 or 25 minutes or so, that something is a full-length pageant. You could also you don't have to stay at one station for the entire day. You could also have a kind of festival style experience of wandering the streets, stopping at any wagon that captured your attention. Or you could follow one play along the entire route and see it 3 times, maybe because your family member or neighbor was acting in it, or friend, or your friend or something. Look, let me share something different still. There a PowerPoint here. Okay. Let's look at the timing spreadsheet. I want to show you that. Go. Here. This is the playing schedule, leaving Trinity Priory in 10-minute increments. And what I did when I created it was, you can see the stations across the top here, and these are the plays headed down, the length of time they last, and they leave in 10-minute increments, as you can see, and I put in bold the stations they play at. And look at how pretty this worked out to be. This was really just the beginning of an experiment to see if it would work. And when it started mapping itself this way in the spreadsheet, that was kind of when I realized I had something. Because look at it wraps like a maypole through the spreadsheet, all the performances. And they track each other really beautifully. I mean, it's just a pretty spreadsheet, y'all. But it shows you just kind of how simple and elegant this plan is. Every individual play, you can scan across a line here, spends about 90 minutes in the kind of the playing field from Trinity to pavement. The first pageant wagon starts out at 8, it's finished at 9:25. Like I said, maybe they go have a beer for breakfast. These folks go have an early lunch. Abraham and Isaac, they start out at 9:30, they're done at 11:30. So 90 minutes to 2 hours is the amount of time each pageant wagon will be on the job. Every station is busy throughout the day. Like I said, about every few minutes, something is happening in front of you. Every half hour or so it's pageant, but the rest of the time it's things passing through, other pageants. And although you can't see it in this slide, at the end of the day, all the stations are finished within about 2 hours of each other. So the playing day at Trinity starts at 8 a.m., finishes around 8 p.m., and at Pavement, the playing day starts, as you can see here, at 9:15, and it ends around 10:15 at night. So about a 12-hour playing day at each individual station, and they all wrap up around 2 hours, within 2 hours of each other. The surprising thing, and to me, the really convincing thing that appeared when I broke the plays up this way was this. Not only does every station get a coherent narrative, but, and you'll just have to trust me on this because you're not reading every single play, every station gets a scene in the Garden of Eden. You get the creation of the angels, you get creation of Adam and Eve, prohibition of the tree of knowledge. That's all in the Garden of Eden. Every station gets a play about the patriarchs. You get the flood, or you get the fall, the expulsion, Cain and Abel, and the building of Noah's Ark, which is that patriarch play, the flood, Abraham and Isaac, another patriarch, Pharaoh and Moses. Every station gets a pageant about Mary's pregnancy and the nativity. The offering of the shepherds, the Annunciation. Every station gets the performance of a miracle, the baptism of Christ, the feast in Simon's house, the Last Supper, the temptation in the wilderness, the raising of Lazarus, the marriage at Cana, turning water into wine, the transfiguration. Every station gets either one of the betrayal of Judas or one of the trials of Christ, the trial before Herod, the agony and the betrayal. So you see, every station is getting you can slot these plays into, what narrative element they're serving. And you could even swap them out and exchange them if you wanted to. You could take a betrayal play from one group and swap it with the betrayal play from another group if you had some reason to do that. So it creates a lot of flexibility. These things are a kind of vessel that holds 12 or 13 plays, and they're individual pieces you can move around within them. Every station gets one pageant about the crucifixion, everyone gets one pageant about the risen Christ, and everyone gets one about Mary's death. So there's the coherent story from creation to the death of Mary, Judgment Day, Doomsday, all the way through at each group, which is to say at each and every station. What this means, of course, is that a spectator doesn't need to see every pageant in order to understand the story that's being told, nor do they have to look at the pageants that are just passing through their station and try to figure out what's happening for them to understand the entire story. They don't have to interpret or fill in any kind of narrative or chronological gap, because there really aren't any. Rather, every station presents a clear narrative that spans creation to doomsday with only a quarter of the plays in the total cycle. So I opened by saying that what I'm here to do is to explain my theory, and you've now heard it pretty much, regarding York's performance strategy, and to give you your reading assignment. As you might guess, I'm going to give you one play group. Specifically, I'm giving you this one, the Oostgate Common Hall Pavement group. I made that into its own slide. It's a particularly important subgroup because, like I mentioned, Common Hall is City Hall, and it's where the mayors and guests and dignitaries would watch the pageant. And Pavement was the final performance station. It's also the location of public executions in York. Keep that in mind when you're reading The Crucifixion, which is one of the plays in this subgroup and a really important play. Think about how powerful it is to stage the crucifixion right there in the place of public execution, how it might make you feel differently about how it might make you think twice about the execution of common criminals, and how it might make you think differently about the execution of Christ. That's a really powerful staging in place. It's using the environment to work with you to make an extra point in addition to the writing and acting. So in the article, I'm also giving you an opportunity to take this research a step further. What I found when the plays were broken out this way is that each subgroup seemed to have a sort of overall theme. There were groups of plays that seemed to be concerned with judgment, with redemption, with doubt, with obedience, and so on. So when you're reading this group, when you're reading the Common Hall Pavement group, what I want you to do is to try to think about what themes you see. If you had to boil these down to sort of that one word, like doubt, redemption, justice, obedience, see if you can figure out what these plays are. And you'll have a group of different answers because there's a lot of lenses you could look through at these plays through. In an article that was published about this plan, I had a paragraph that said, indeed, there are numerous potential archival and theoretical and critical spin-offs from this proposed strategy. What does it mean for the audience to see only one quarter of the cycle, and which quarter, assuming that they choose to sit at a single station and remain there all day? If they wander about, what does it mean to see pageants in a fragmented, disconnected, festival-like atmosphere? Besides the large thematic connections within each proposed subgroup here, there are also potentially linguistic, poetic, gestural, theatrical, guild-related, or doctrinal resonances between pageants that are grouped together. That's research that my article couldn't cover because I was just laying out the kind of practical how they moved through the streets angle. But maybe something that could drive discussion for this part of the class is whether or not you see any of those links. Are the guilds who presented these pageants, these 12, 13 pageants, are they people from industries that work together already? Would it be maybe all the people involved in building a house, or all the people involved in food preparation, like butchers and animal husbandry type farmers and butchers and grocery sellers? Are there guild connections? Are there single words or phrases that seem to echo across all of the plays? Linguistic resonances. Are there poetic resonances of some sort, like a particular, not necessarily something so granular as a rhyme scheme, but are there sort of poetic things that are happening? Are there, if you imagine the plays as being performed, if you sort of act them out in your mind a little bit, are there gestures that move? Is someone struck in all the plays or something like that? Are there gestural moments, theatrical moments when you would stage this? Does every play have a surprise or a reveal of some sort? Things like that. Any sort of links you can draw between these little groups would be really interesting. And I'm going to try to attend the class where you talk about this just to hear what you find. Because, like I said, that's research I didn't have time or space to do, or space to write about. So it's research that's waiting to be done by the next scholar who comes along and takes this further. And that can easily be one of you. So that's, I'm going to try and listen to them. You are, as far as I know, the first group of students to read them in this fashion. You're the first people to kind of read them by subgroup. So you may very well be the very first person in the in the long history of these plays. You may be the first person to see that connection. And you would make a very real contribution to academic knowledge. So that's the assignment. to go back to, I'm going to stop sharing and pop you back over to the website. Whoops. Of course, maybe I should do the share screen thing first. I should really. Okay, that's the screen I want to share, and go back here. So that's your assignment. It's the, okay, now I'll show you. It's the creation of the angels and the fall of Lucifer. Well, you'll have the PowerPoint because I really honestly would not be able to go back and forth to it. It's 1, 5, 9, 13, 17, 21, 23A, which does not have a text, 27, 31, 35, 39, 43, and 47, as they are numbered in the on this website, on the York Christie Plays, the team's texts. So that's it from me, and I look forward to hearing what you found in them. Thanks. And I will stop the sharing and actually sign off in person. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.